You know, last year I saw a presentation from the CityWorks 101 class, and it was about gangs in Fort Collins. Yep, that's right, gangs in Fort Collins. And I thought to myself, you know what, everybody should have the opportunity to hear about this. And so guess what? Today in the studio, I have a special guest, Marc Neal, who's a police officer with our Police Services Division. Marc, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Now, Marc, you're part of our Criminal Impact Unit.
Yes.
And that is a unit that focuses on other things, but specifically gang activity here in Fort Collins.
Yes, we do.
And I've seen your presentation. It actually starts with this thing called a disclaimer. You know, there are gangs in Fort Collins. I don't think a lot of people would believe you.
No, and I put that in there because I do that talk. I've done that talk probably about 100 times. And after about the 40th time, I started hearing feedback that, well, you know, Officer Neal says there are no gangs in Fort Collins.
Right.
And I thought, well, wait a minute, that's not what I say in the talk. But
right.
So I started putting that disclaimer in because, you know, while we don't have a lot of gang activity, we do have gang members, we do have some gang activity, we do have gang crime. Right. Albeit we're not South Central Los Angeles or New York City, but we do have it, and we just want people to understand what that looks like when we're talking about gang activity in Fort Collins.
Well, let's talk about what that looks like. You know, you draw a line between gang-related crime, I'm going to mess up the term, so you're going to have to fix me, but gang-related crime versus sort of just crime done by gang members.
Yeah, gang-related crime, gang-motivated crime.
Motivated,
and,
that was what I was looking for.
We talk about that, and then we have gang-involved crime. The gang-related, gang-motivated crime is typically going to be done by gang members. That's what we traditionally think of as gang crime, where drive-by shooting or a fight, you know, something done by one gang to build its reputation, whether it's drug dealing to build its financial viability, you know, to help pay to get other gang members out of jail when they get arrested. You know, anything like that, we call gang-related, gang-motivated crime because it's done by a gang to further itself, to grow itself. Then we have the gang-involved crime, which is a gang member happens to commit a crime. And kind of the story that I always use with that is years ago I had a gang member who stole a car in Longmont to drive back to Fort Collins. And when I was talking to him, it came out that he stole the car because to get he and his girlfriend from Longmont back to Fort Collins in the middle of winter.
No other reason.
That was it.
Right.
So he wasn't going to try to sell the car to get money for his gang. He wasn't going to use it for a drive-by or anything like that. It was just to get from point A to point B. That's just gang-involved crime.
So when you look at sort of these different categories, I mean, how does Fort Collins rank, I mean, for lack of a better word, among other communities in Larimer County or even other communities in the Front Range?
Well, you know, in Larimer County, I'd say between us and Loveland, so since we're the major cities in Larimer County, yeah, we're about equal, very low though. Right. When you're talking about Colorado, we still, for our size, for our demographics, for what we have as a community, we're still very low. You know, raw numbers, you know, kind of escape me right now, but when you take into account that we average fewer than 100 gang-related crimes per year, and case-wise, or call for service, we might handle, you know, 170 to 200,000 calls for service. And
it's a very low proportion.
Yes, very low, very low.
You know, I think, in particular over the last decade, that sort of this idea of gang culture has taken hold throughout the nation. And you spend a lot of time in your talk speaking about sort of the identifiers of gangs. And what are some of the things that, you know, the difference between graffiti for the sake of graffiti and gang-related graffiti?
When we're talking about graffiti, we basically, well, there's all kinds of graffiti in the world. You know, you look at the Berlin Wall. What was that? Right. It was political graffiti. We deal with mostly tagger graffiti and gang graffiti. Tagger graffiti is taggers. They want to get their name up everywhere. They, you know, see their name, you know, for lack of a better term, in lights all over the place. So they put their name up everywhere, and that's what you see a lot of around town, where you can't really tell what it says.
Right.
They don't care if you can tell what it says or not. They know what it is. It's their moniker, their tag. Gang graffiti is usually done to denote a territory or a threat. So you're going to be able to understand that. It's going to be the name of a gang. It's going to be a number associated with the gang, whatever that is, and you'll be able to see what it is. It won't be bubble writing. It won't be cute.
Right.
It won't be colorful. It'll just be, this is who
Purposeful.
we are. Yes.
You know, something that struck me in that is a number. I mean, there's almost sort of this secret language of gangs that someone like me is so unfamiliar with, and I found so interesting. You know, there's certain numbers and there's certain hand signs that are associated with different gangs.
Here in Fort Collins, and you hit on this at first, and I really want to speak to it, is that the gang culture. What we're seeing, as with anything that happens, is you have a crossover. So years ago, or say 20 years ago, you had only gang members would dress a certain way, wear a certain
Right.
color, present themselves in a certain fashion. Now everybody does.
Right.
Because it's, and like the analogy I use in my talk is, for kids who are going to school and feel that school's a dangerous place and they don't want to get picked on, I say, would you go to school looking like Steve Urkel or Snoop Dogg?
Right.
And they're going to pick Snoop Dogg because Snoop Dogg doesn't get picked on.
Right.
So, and I joke about that, but at the same time, that's how gang culture has become mainstream. When we talk about the numbers, here in Fort Collins, predominantly gang members and people who identify with gang culture will use numbers 13 and 14. Those are traditional numbers used by some of the larger street gangs based out of California. 13 being the Southsider gang, 14 for the Northsider gang. So that now, Lucky 13 clothing has come out.
Oh, wow.
That becomes tailor-made for kids who want to identify as Southsiders. They buy a belt buckle with a 13 on it. Now they show those numbers out. The problem with it is that these kids are doing it to appear tough or appear unapproachable and not get picked on. But what they do is they just present the picture to real gang members that
Right.
they want to be a part of that world.
When you're looking at that younger age and that younger demographic, it's about kids behaving as kids have always behaved, where you're looking for that sense of identity and you're looking for a peer group, you're looking for protection and safety. And unfortunately, when you choose this route, it just has a much different consequences than if you choose to be part of the debate club.
Exactly. And people don't see that, they don't relate it back to what it was like in the 40s, 50s. Kids have, since there have been kids, have fought with each other, have not gotten along. What we're starting to do is add guns,
Yeah.
a lot more violence, a propensity of violence, an attitude of I don't care about anybody, and a fairly antisocial attitude. You put those things in the mix, and it becomes a lot different. Now it's 1,000 times. It's exponential
Yeah.
compared to what it was. We talk about the 50s and how wonderful it was in the 50s.
Right.
Well, let's go back to a West Side Story.
Right.
What did we do there?
Gang fighting through dance.
That's it's glamorous.
Right.
It's glamorous. But now, when we have the same thing in the 90s, in 2000 and 2010, it's with guns. It's anonymous drive-bys.
Right.
It's you don't know. And I think it's that anonymous sense, that sense of the finality of the murders. It's not, we're not just getting mad at each other and then we go
Right.
about our business. It's the person's dead. And that's where it becomes such a shock to us. But that's where we also see it as police officers and in law enforcement, so critical to reach those kids to say, you can't even mess with this.
Right.
You can't even play like this.
Right.
You're tap dancing on the edge of the deep end of the swimming pool and you don't know how to swim.
Right.
You're playing around with this
Right.
because you think it's fun, but you don't understand the dangers associated with it. I think for parents to understand is that when they see the kids dress in a certain way, it's not that their kid that suddenly there's this huge gang out there,
Right.
but that it's the behavior that comes with it, and it's the clothing that catches them in the trap that now they have to act a certain way and be a certain way. And really big for us is to try to talk to them about those consequences and see where we can replace that negative with something positive.
Right. there's an expression that you use, which is crabs in a bucket. You know, if you are involved in that lifestyle and that's part of your culture and you try and get out of it, it's a lot harder to get out than it is to decline to go in.
That's very hard. Yeah, it's like crabs in a bucket. You know, you're trying to climb out, and the other crabs are trying to climb out too, and they just all start grabbing at legs and feet and claws, and next thing you know, you're back in.
Yeah.
I was talking to a young lady just this morning, and she was talking about her brother, who is a local gang member, and she said that one of the things that caught her about him is that she noticed that it seemed that the positive response he got from other young people, the gang members, when he did something wrong, or when he was really like doing his gang thing,
Right.
was better to him than the consequences of sitting in jail for the next 6 months or 7 months. And she said that's when I realized that I didn't know what to do for him,
Right.
didn't know how to help him change, because she said that he seemed more ready to accept that positive stuff that was really negative than the negative consequences for those actions.
Wow. So, I mean, what do you tell that poor girl, or what do you tell parents? As a parent, like I already am now fully ridden with anxiety, and my kids are 2 and under. I mean, how do you help her, and you know, give her the tools to have that discussion?
You know, what I told her, I said, I've worked with many kids in Fort Collins since I've been here on that, where I said, hey, you know, I want to help you not be doing this. And some have listened to me, and some have
Right.
called me. You know, I tell them, I said, call me 24 hours a day, any time of day or night, call me. And some do and some don't. And what I told her is, I said, you can't change them. You can't stop them. All you can do is tell them you got the support at the
Right.
beginning. And when they continue to falter, it's like any parent, you have to let them make those mistakes, but then show that when they're ready to come around,
Right.
that the door's not locked,
Right.
the door's open, and that support will continue to be there. And I say, you know, you have to let them take that ride themselves sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, you can feel bad and you can do all that stuff, but you have to let them do it themselves. You know, it's like, I say, go back to when I was a little kid. I was climbing on a chair, in the back of a chair, and my dad was like, hey, you know, told my mom, don't let him do that. And my mom said, why? He said, because he'll fall. She says, well, if he falls and hurts himself, he might not do it again. And, you know, if you're always
That
protected.
simple principle, it is, and
Yeah.
you know, it gets harder when those consequences are
Yeah.
greater.
Yeah, and with the consequences we're talking about with gangs, you know, it's life and death. And if someone doesn't understand that, you know, the hopefully that it's not too late for them to
Right.
catch the lesson.
Right. And hopefully you can communicate that severity, because I imagine that has to be a frustrating element of, you know, kids have a hard time understanding consequences regardless of whether they are you fall off the back of a chair, or, you know, this could really put your life in danger.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be a tough thing to communicate.
It's a sense, you know, a young person's sense of immortality.
Right.
A young person's sense of, I can't really get hurt at this. You know, we see it many times when we're doing something where we have a person with a gun someplace, and they're in a house, and people will want to see what's going on, as if, since they're not really part of it,
Right.
they can't be touched by it.
Right.
And we tell them, get out of here. And,
Right.
and they don't understand that. You know, it's like young people often do. They think that they can't meet an early end, or things can't go really wrong or
Right.
tragically wrong for them. And it's trying to get that point across in this respect of gang activity, that what happens to you will stay with you. And I tell kids, just because you decide to get out of a gang and you decide to stop doing what you're doing, doesn't mean the rest of the world is willing to allow you to do that.
Right.
It's catching up. It's like a big slingshot. You know, you've pulled it back, but now it's got to catch up to you.
Right.
And the trouble, just because today they decide to stop doing it, doesn't mean that the trouble won't come back to them a month, 2 months, next year. And they don't understand that.
Yeah.
They don't understand that. And that's the hardest thing to try to teach them, is to say, just because you're going to have to live with these consequences that you've done today, even next year, maybe 5 years from now.
You know, one of my big takeaways from your talk is that sense of just honesty with your kids, because they're not going to buy the authenticity behind talking about these consequences if you haven't been honest about the whole process up until then. And there's things even along the lines of, if you haven't been a part of that culture, you haven't faced that challenge, don't speak to it like you have. And I think that's a really, for me, that was a really big aha moment of, you really need to sort of build that, like any relationship, build that credibility, and hopefully when the time comes, you have enough of that credibility to help kids steer in the right direction.
Well, the one thing to finish up, I guess, is that I tell people that don't come from someplace that's not you.
Right.
Give the kid your genuine self. Be truthful with them. Don't BS them, because they'll go, gee, another person to fail me. Neat. I've had enough of that.
Right.
Well, and I say, show them what you are. Give them that other side. That's the replacement. When you talk about what are you going to replace that gang activity with, it's the normal life, the good life, the positive life, the regular job, the success in your life, relationship-wise, whatever that is. That's the picture you want to show them. You don't want to try to be hardcore with them. They understand hardcore. You're trying to take them away from that.
Right.
So don't turn around and now try to be hardcore with them. It confuses them. They say, I thought you didn't want me to be that, but now you're trying to be it with me.
Right. It's such an interesting topic, and I literally could sit here all day and talk about it with you, because you've been involved with this unit for 8 years now, and I think you've seen a lot of good and bad, I'm sure, over the years. And I know that you guys work really hard to keep people going. Gangs in Fort Collins? I didn't know that. So thank you.
That's a good thing that people say, gangs in Fort Collins. I thought there weren't. So.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you again for your time and all your hard work. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time on Studio 14.